All right. All right, so last session of the day is on assignments. So in Canvas, assignments are usually anything that isn't a quiz or a discussion. So it's, for the most part, it's people who want to collect papers. That would be like the main use case. It can also be if you want to collect images or links, like anything else your students create and you want to kind of collect it all in one place. That is essentially what a Canvas assignment is. So from the Canvas course, which you guys hopefully can see right now.
Real quick question, Kelly.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Can those assignments be video assignments that they upload?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Great.
So from this Canvas course that we've been playing in all day, I am going to click on assignments. Now, what's confusing, and it is confusing, so bear with me, the word assignments in Canvas almost has a double meaning. So assignments is what we just talked about where you're collecting something, but the assignments area in Canvas is a mix and match of any assignment type. So that is why we've already talked about discussions today, and we've already talked about quizzes. And that's why when I go to my assignments area, I see the discussion and I see the quiz, okay? So this is where all those interactive graded items live. So I feel like that's where it's like a double meaning. So if you want to create the type of assignment that we were intending, where you can collect their items, whatever that might be, you are going to click plus assignment from the assignment area. There we go. And like everything else we've seen so far, we are going to name it. So I'm going to call it week 1 reflection. This is where our directions are going to go. You can be as robust as you need because of all your editing features. Again, you have the ability to upload and record a video if you want to give more like inflection or your own presence to the directions. I feel like that could be very helpful. You can make a list of things you might need from them. So in an online environment, as you're moving to, your directions for what you want them to do probably need to be a little more detailed than you're used to giving them, just because they're never going to hear you in class reiterating what you want them to do, right? And that's where your video might be really handy, because what you normally would say to them face to face, you can capture that in one of your videos, okay? And remember, that can easily be done here under this record media button. There I am. All right, so I can retell what I want to say. All right, so directions. Go here. I might make a list like read this, watch this, write a 3 to 5 page paper on why you think that is good or bad. Okay, super simple. All right, so a lot of what we've been doing when we're getting into these very specific items is going through the settings at the bottom, because that's where things start to differ in Canvas. So all the stuff we've done so far has been the same, no matter what tool we've been using. And now we're going to get different things down here. So let's go through what these items are. So number 1 is how many points is this item worth? If you want it to be 0, that's totally fine, or you can set a number to it. So I'm going to say 50 points. If you are a weighted grade book, you can tell it what category it's in. If you are not a weighted grade book, you don't have to worry about it. Just leave it what it is. In the grade book, you can determine how it's displayed to your students. So by default, it does display it as a points. So if I went to grade this paper, since I called it 50 points, it would show a 45 out of 50 or a 47 out of 50. But if you'd rather have it be a percentage, you can do that. You can make it a complete incomplete, which I highly recommend you at least consider sometimes, because in terms of online grading load, this is a nice way to say, I recognize your work, I see what you're doing, but I'm not going to go in and like analyze all these points and percentages like, you know, I would in some other things. So for low stakes things, a complete incomplete can be really handy. You can do letter grade, GPA scale, or even not even graded. So you do have a lot of options here. You can also do, and this is a little bit new in Canvas, you can still create stuff that still has something you want to give like grades and comments to, But if you don't want it to actually count towards their final grade, you can actually check this box and it won't even count towards the rest of what you're doing. So I'm gonna uncheck that. And then here in the submission type area is probably the meat of what a Canvas assignment does. So by default, you're gonna see it's an online assignment, which is what you see here. And for what we're doing now that we're moving online is pretty much what you're gonna be looking to do. Your other options here would be no submission. So no submission is great if you still need that column in your grade book in order to give them a value or a score, but they don't actually have to give you anything. So that might be important if they're doing something like an oral something or something that doesn't have a physical component that you can collect. Online, so no submission has no other settings. Online is what we see here. And this is where you get to decide what options you're going to give them based on what you're trying to collect from them. Do you want them to just be able to type into Canvas? You can make them do that. So this might be something that's short. Do you want them to submit to you a link? So maybe they were working on something like a Google site or a presentation somewhere online on another tool, and you really just want them to link to it so that you can go see it. You can collect a link, and you can mix and match these things too. The next one is media recordings. Media recordings is exactly this. This is what they would get to do. If you just want them to give a quick like, hey, this is my reflection on this piece, and you want them to be able to record media and or upload something they've already created elsewhere, you can demand that they do it as a media recording. Demand sounds so rough. And then your last option is file upload, which is definitely the most common. This is where you're getting Word docs, PDFs, PowerPoints, Excels, whatever you want there. So that's usually the most common thing. And if you want to go even farther, you can actually restrict what file types you want. So you can say, here's a list of the ones I will accept. I will accept like Microsoft documents, I will accept PDFs, but I will not accept Apple Pages or something like that. And that way you can restrict it that way. That, again, the more restrictions you set on things, the more, I don't want to say trouble you could potentially have, but the more things will probably cause bigger questions. So I'm going to leave file uploads, okay? I'm going to go back to the online and show you the other options. On paper is very similar to no submission. This is better when we are face-to-face because essentially you're indicating to the student, here's this assignment you're doing. There's going to be a column in the grade book, but when you say on paper, you're indicating to the student they're actually going to physically turn something into you as they would in class, where no submission lets them know that there's nothing they're forgetting to do, essentially. And then your last option is external tool. And on purpose, I am not going to talk about Turnitin until later in this hour block, but this is potentially one of your options for Turnitin, which is our plagiarism detection. For right now, I'm just going to say online as a file upload just to show you that right now. There's two, actually, no, I am going to talk about Turnitin. I changed my mind. There are two ways to do Turnitin. One of them is through external tools. So if I click on that, I can click this search button or I can click find and select Turnitin. To me, this is actually the hardest way to do Turnitin because it actually loads the Turnitin interface into Canvas versus the second way I'm going to show you. There's a whole thing. If you go back to Keep Teaching, this is really our IET website, the Keep Teaching. So if you come up here to the top and go to Turnitin, this goes through the difference between the two options. So Turnitin external tool, which is the one I'm just showing you, that's really excellent if you like to use Turnitin and all their features within Turnitin. Because Turnitin, you have the ability to like grade and whatever. If you're using Turnitin, because really all you care about is that plagiarism score and potentially the sources that those scores might produce, then the second way I'm going to show you is a lot easier and a lot more streamlined. Okay, so it depends on how much Turnitin you want to do, determines which way you go. So this is the more advanced, not more advanced, this is the more Turnitin way, is to do external tool. I'm going to go back to online click file upload. When you say file upload, you can see this plagiarism review box pops up. It doesn't exist until you click file upload. But when you do, you just need to select turn it in from here. And this is the way, personally, I think it works better because I feel like it's more Canvas than turn it in. But this is when you want the score. You want to know the sources that those scores potentially are flagging, but you don't need to go into turn it in and do all their crazy things. You want to really stay into Canvas for like grading and commenting. So if you select turn it in, you get your settings that you can set. Standard paper repository is the default. If you click on this, you also have the option to say do not store the submitted papers. Whenever a student submits to turn it in, it becomes part of our F&M repository, and it's something that other Turnitin institutions around the world can check against for plagiarism. So you can or can't, I mean, it's up to you as the instructor if you want those papers to go in there. Usually it's no one messes with it unless you're doing something where you want them to turn it in as like a draft. So if this is a draft of maybe a bigger assignment, I would say do not store the papers in the repository, because potentially when they turn in their final assignment of the same paper, then you can say store it. You don't want it to flag the same paper because you've done it multiple times, essentially. So I'm going to say standard paper repository. This is where you can select what you do want it to check against. Do you want it to check? And they're all checked by default. So if you want to uncheck something, you can. So we have our student repository. We have website content. So Turnitin will run it against the web in general. And then Turnitin can also run it against periodicals, journals, and publications in general. I'm not even totally sure why you would check or uncheck any of those, because mostly people just want to know like the whole shebang. And then the similarity report down at the bottom, this can be handy because a lot of times when stuff is submitted through Turnitin, a lot of the things that will flag, which skews that percentage score, is stuff that is cited correctly, like their bibliography or stuff that's quoted. So you can say, don't even worry about that because I already know that's kind of commonplace, right? And then if there's something you were going to use repeatedly, turn it in, and you want to just save those settings for future use, you can say save it, and I'll always have those same settings every time I try to toggle turn it in. And that way you don't have to redo this part we're doing right now. Okay. So this personally would be my preference for using Turnitin, unless you want to use all the Turnitin features, and that can go pretty far. So I'm going to leave this here. And then we talked about groups. Oh, wait, there's one more setting. When do you show students the Turnitin report? So if you guys have used Turnitin before, you know it runs the paper. It's definitely not instant. And I would also imagine in right now where everyone's going online, Turnitin's probably going to get slower, because Turnitin's slow every time during finals too. But this setting is letting you choose if and when, if ever, your students even see their Turnitin score. You'll always see it as the instructor, but as soon as Turnitin comes up with their report, do you want your students to see it immediately? Do you want your students to see their report after you graded it? Do you want to see them to see it after the due date, or do you never want your students to see their Turnitin score? So that's what these options are here. Earlier this morning, we talked about group assignments, and that recording will be on the Keep Teaching here soon. But this assignments you can do as group assignments. So I'm going to check this box so you can see all the settings that pop down. So earlier today, we did set up groups. We set up project groups. In project groups, they're going to get their own little canvas to work on. If I want to take that a little farther and I want that project to actually produce some sort of like paper that I want them to turn in as a group, I can say, this is now a group assignment. I would like the project groups to turn in their work as their group. And you can either even choose to assign each grade individually, or, which can potentially save you time as an instructor, you can assign. So say they submit in their paper as a group, only one person from the group now has to submit, and everyone, it shows on your grade book that everyone in that group submitted the same thing. If you grade one of those papers, then that same grade now goes for that whole group. So that could potentially save you time. You can always override any of those grades, Or if you don't even want to go down that direction, you can also say, I still want to grade them individually, even though they turned it in as a group. So that's what these group settings mean. And even if you don't want to mess with that and you still want groups to submit, just tell all of them to submit them separately and you get the same feel. Peer reviews. So I think peer reviews are pretty powerful in Canvas. So again, this is one, if you check it, then all your options appear. If you don't check it, you don't see what you have. Peer review will essentially assign students each other's work to give comments on. You can assign it so that you have to manually pair them up or let Canvas automatically pair them up. And you can also make it so the peer reviews are anonymous. So if I'm peer reviewing Cindy's paper, she doesn't know my name's associated with any of those comments. If you want a true peer review feel, which means it's anonymous on both sides, then you're also going to have to add to your directions that students don't put their name on their paper, because the peer reviewer is always going to see who it is if they choose to put their name on their paper. So if like having something anonymous is super important and you want it to go both ways, just remember kind of to do that extra set of directions. So I'm going to unflag that because we're going to try to keep this simple so I can show you what it looks like after they've submitted. And then this bottom assign box is very similar to everything else that we've seen in discussions and quizzes. This is where you can give the due date. This is where you can give them a window of opportunity to submit it. But again, by just setting the due date, even if they submit it late, it's still going to appear in your gradebook as late. So then you can adjust, you know, whatever, based on whatever your late policy is. So I'm going to check my settings here. All right. I'm going to save and publish so that my lovely assistants can go in as a student and actually submit stuff so that we can see what it looks like in the gradebook. I'm also going to right now, since I'm sharing my screen, I'm going to go into student view of my course, which all of you can do. So I'm going to go back to my home page. I'm going to click this button here called student view. What this does is it puts you in the view of what your students see. It's not 100% perfect, but it allows you to know what they're seeing and how things go. You see this pinkish purple box it will set at the bottom so that you always know you're in student view. So since what my goal is right now is to actually show you guys what it looks like to submit as a student, I'm going to go to assignments where we just created that one. I'm going to click on week 1 reflection. And this is what it's going to look like for your students. So remember, we did enable turn it in for this assignment. So I'm going to click submit assignment. And we also wanted them to do a file upload. So you can see that's their tab option here. You do see Google Drive because students on their own can connect their F&M Google account to their Canvas account. What this means is if they are a Google Drive user, like Google Docs, which a lot of them are, a lot of them don't even have Microsoft Office or they don't use Canvas Pages or whatever. So they can still make their writing sample in Google. And what they would do is they would click on Google Drive. It would read their drive and I can't see. This is one of those things you can't do while you're pretending to be somebody else. Essentially what they would do is find their paper in Google Drive and submit it. And what Canvas does is it converts that paper to a PDF. And what's that doing is it's freezing the formatting. Because if they've submitted a true Google Doc assignment to you, they can still edit after the fact and make changes. But when Canvas flips it to a PDF, it freezes that so that they can't make any more changes. And what's crazy about the Google stuff is like, if a student submits a PDF and you look at it in your gradebook, you don't even know if it was a Google assignment initially. They took that all away. Even from the administrative side, I can't see how they submitted it. So sometimes I assume when it's a PDF, that might be how they did it, or they're saving anything as a PDF, which is really the best format. So again, I'm a student. I gave them the file upload option in my settings. Because this is a turn it in assignment, this checkbox also appears, and they are not allowed to submit unless they check that box, which is basically says this assignment submission is my own original work. So that's kind of them signing off. So when they go to submit a file upload, it's just like attaching to an email. So let's see what I have here. I'm just going to find a file. I have to check that box. If I go to submit, it gives me this naughty pop-up here that says you must agree before you submit, because it also has turn it in happening. So I'm going to check the box. I'm going to submit the assignment. So it's really pretty easy for them, this type of tool. When they submit, as you see right now, they have a summary here. They know the time. You know all this information too, but this is where your students would see it. They know they submitted. They have the timestamp of what they submitted, and they have the record of what they submitted. They do have the ability to resubmit. As you see here where it says resubmit assignment, when they resubmit, they only ever see their latest submission. When you, as the instructor, go into the SpeedGrader, you can actually see all of their submissions. And then based on whatever the situation was, either choose their latest submission or whatever. All right, so I'm going to leave student view because now we're going to see what this looks like from a grading perspective. Okay, so there are multiple ways to get into the gradebook in Canvas. So could either click SpeedGrader right here, or I could just download my submissions as a bulk submission. So if you don't want to use Canvas as your grading mechanism, you can just download them to your computer and then do what you want with them. So SpeedGrader you can access from here, or I'm going to do it a different way just because I did SpeedGrader last session, just to show you a different way. So I'm actually going to click on Grades from the Canvas menu over here, Grades. And my initial view is going to be the spreadsheet type view, okay? So here is that week 1 reflection that we just did. You can see my student, Amy, submitted. You can see the test student, which was me, submitted. Because we have color-coded icons, Turnitin has already completed the process for our 2 papers. Cindy and Megan have exclamation points instead of the colors, which means Turnitin hasn't finished processing yet, because Turnitin takes time, okay? If I want to get in the SpeedGrader, which means I want to go see more details about someone's paper, all I need to do is click into one of the cells so that I can get this arrow and go into the SpeedGrader. Again, you can get there other ways. It might be a lot quicker. Aw, wow, Megan. All right, so this is the SpeedGrader. So I'm going to point out a bunch of things in here, because this is where submitting papers in Canvas can be very, very powerful. Number 1, you see the timestamp of when she submitted, which is right here. Here is the actual document. So if you would like to download this for whatever reason and have a copy, you may just click this arrow right here. The exclamation point is because Turnitin is really sad right now. So I, as the instructor, can actually say resubmit to Turnitin and see if we get a better result. So right now I see instead of an exclamation point, I'm seeing a timer, I guess, which means submission is pending. So let's go to one that actually has a score, because that will be helpful. All right. So here's Amy's. Amy has a percentage score, and Turnitin gave her a percentage of 0, which means Turnitin says this work that I see over here on the left has 0 plagiarism to it. So congratulations, Amy. That's amazing. I am going to see what mine looks like. Okay. Mine, this is my test student submission, has a percentage score of 23. So Turnitin is, remember, this is just computer generated. This doesn't have human interaction. So Turnitin is assuming that 23% of this document has plagiarism to it. Okay. If all I care about is this percentage score, that's all I need to do. If I want to dive into the details and see more what that means, all I have to do is actually click on that number. So I'm going to click on 23%. And it's going to have me leave Canvas and open a new window in Turnitin. So give me a second as this opens here. Okay. So now I have left Canvas and I'm in Turnitin. And you can see it's taken my document and it's basically marked it up. And these are very living, clickable documents. So if I start clicking around, you're going to see these pop-ups of it telling me where it thinks some of this stuff has come from. So this is where your professional eye comes in. If their percentage score is really high, like say it's like 57 or something like that, and you come in here and determine that the stuff Turnitin is flagging as really plagiarism, are very common sentences, then you need to use your best professional judgment whether or not you think that is really plagiarism or not. So when I look at this as a whole, I don't think it's probably as bad as like the score was indicating, because these are very general statements that multiple people are probably using. Does that make sense? So I'm gonna go back into Canvas. So you only have to click on the number or the color, whatever you want to indicate there, only if you really want to get into the details about what Turnitin determined that score, how that score was determined. If all you care about is what that score is, then you don't even have to do anything. Canvas is going to tell you that right in the speed grader, right? So a couple other things to point out here. Let's see. You can give a general score here. So remember, we made this assignment out of 50 points. So I can, if the bare minimum, I can be like, okay, they get a 45, done, okay? You could also add more general comments. So the commenting down here would be generally for whatever they submitted. You could also upload an attachment in the comment area. So maybe there's some sort of system you already have and you want to, or maybe you downloaded their paper and you want to re-upload any corrections you may have made, you can do that. You will see the media comment button. So we've seen this multiple times in Canvas. So if you are sick of typing and you would much rather give them verbal feedback, that's an option in the speed grader as well, which can also be a huge time saver for you. And the next one might be hit or miss, but we're going to try it anyway. This is another potential time saver for you, but essentially I'm going to click record. Your paper had some really great points, but I would like you to focus more on your thesis statement from the previous week. So that feature is you basically speech to text, getting your comment in there. So again, if you're sick of typing, or if you feel like talking your comments out over typing your comments out, you have those options here in the speed grader. So I used the third option, which just says speech recognition. I spoke what I wanted to say. I put it in here, and you can still edit if it messes up because it won't be 100% perfect. Like, it's never going to capture punctuation. So keep that in mind. You always put in your punctuation. So that's all the stuff here on the right. And then if I want to submit my comment, I can do that. So I just submitted my comment. What you have on the left, where you actually see a preview of their paper, I think is even more powerful. So if you've ever done track changes in Word, or if you've ever made comments in a Google Doc, this is Canvas's version of that without ever having to leave Canvas. So this really only works when someone uploads an image or a document. If they give you a link to like a video or something, you're not going to have these features, but you'll always have these general comment features. So since this was a document, you will see all these items up here at the top, and all of these are, you can hover over them to know what they are your ability to put in comments like, great point. You can highlight stuff and make a comment. You can do general like text box of comment. You can say something in the paper. You can strike through stuff. So it has a lot of the similar functionality that you would normally do in any sort of like file editing software. But these are all things that are viewable by your students as a commenting mechanism. Now, even though I just showed you a lot of stuff, all of this, the more stuff you layer into the grading, the more time consuming it's going to be for you. So I'm not saying to do it all. I'm saying to pick and choose what is the most meaningful for not only you, but the most meaningful for your students. So if you don't think your students are going to go back and revisit this anyway, because you're already moving on in your class, then don't waste your time doing this. Or if you already have another method that you do, then go for that instead. Nancy, I'm not totally sure the answer to this, but I'm going to take a quick guess. She wasn't seeing the speech to text button down here. I'm in Google Chrome, and I'm wondering if that's something that doesn't appear to every browser. So if you're looking in another browser, I'm curious if that's part of it. All right, so let's see. I'm trying to think. Assignments are probably one of the more used things, but it's also one of the simplest things to explain because I feel like this is pretty intuitive because it doesn't have as many bells and whistles as some of the other tools in Canvas. So what questions do you guys have about assignments?
Kelly,
Yeah.
there was a previous question whether students would be able to see what all the assignments that were uploaded so you could have a class discussion. And more specifically, since I'm looking at doing video uploads, whether students would also have access to all the video uploads.
Okay, so great question. In Canvas, when you do quizzes and when you do assignments, as we just did, those are very much private between you and your student. So they're submitting stuff to you because you're their professor. The one place in Canvas that's more public facing is discussions. So if you want them to submit stuff, but also have other students be able to see it and or comment on it, then you actually are going to want them to submit it as a discussion. And that's one of those creative ways to use a discussion that's not like a bunch of types like text. So yeah, if you want them to make videos or post videos, but then have each other see them, discussions is definitely the way to go.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
So Kelly,
Yes.
If you do that and like say you put you make the reading summary be a discussion instead, can you grade that with a rubric?
Yes. So in assignments and in discussions, you can add rubrics to them. If you add a rubric, since I'm already in the speed grader, I'll point it out here. If you add a rubric to anything, that'll actually appear right above here. And you can click on the different items in your rubric to start populating the total of their grade based on how you have their rubric set up. If the only time a graded discussion is going to appear in this grade book is if you actually say your discussion is graded, and that was one of the options in the discussions area. If you make things ungraded, then you don't get this speed grader feel. It has to be a graded something in order to appear here. When you grade discussions versus what we're doing now, let me see if I can, based on what we did this morning, hold on. Let me see if I can mock this up for you. Okay. So this is the discussion that we created earlier this morning. No rubric attached. This is also where we made it complete incomplete. So I can just give her complete and it automatically gives her a 10 out of 10. What discussions will do in the speed grader is actually filter out only what this particular student has said, which is what it says up here. The submissions for this assignment are posted in the assignments discussion. Below are the discussion posts for Cindy Wingenroth. And if you want to view the whole discussion, you can click here. So it does filter it in a nice way. Sometimes you won't know the context of their comments without looking at the full discussion. But if what you're really trying to do is check on what this particular student did in the discussion, by looking at it in speed grader view, you can actually filter out just their stuff, which usually people really like.
So, but if you go back to the peer review idea, people can only be assigned to peer review one other paper?
You can assign them multiple people to peer review.
Can you do the whole class? Like
everyone will peer review everyone's paper?
Yeah, well, see, with the reading summaries, in my case, I always have some prompts in the middle of the summary. They're just questions that are short answer. And my classes found it really valuable when we get together for our discussion. I've already had them making their document they hand in be anonymous, and we just stick them all in the middle of the table, and then everybody polls one, and then they look at the summary responses that whoever it was wrote, and then we go around and we say who thinks they, who looks like they have a good answer on their sheet that they randomly pulled.
Mhm.
And it makes it really nice because nobody is put on the spot, but we get at what the right answer is, and then they get to see what good summaries look like too.
Okay, so I'm back in the editing settings for an assignment. When I check on peer review, I think it defaults to manually assign peer reviews. If you click automatically assign peer reviews, this is where you can say you want them, like how many reviews per person. So like maybe each person needs to do 3. So this is where you can set that number. So each person is going to get 3 people to review. And then when they do a peer review, they're actually going to get, hold on, let me find where I am. It's actually going to look very similar to this. So the view you guys get in the speed grader is the same view they get in a peer review. So you can actually have them use these tools up here to make comments on their classmates' papers as well. And if you added a rubric, they would also get that rubric. The peer review doesn't give a student a grade. You still control that grade. But you would be able to see what the peer reviewer said about the student. The student gets to see what the peer reviewer says about them. And then you can let that determine a grade however you want. A lot of times what I see is people who want to do peer review also want to give credit for the peer reviewers. So you would almost have to set up a separate assignment that maybe is worth a few points to give them credit for doing the peer review. You're not going to be able to give them credit for doing the peer review necessarily in the one they're actually doing, if that makes sense.
Well, if you have already had a rubric for your reading summary, for example, then there isn't any way to turn off them seeing that rubric and needing to check boxes on that, which isn't really my purpose here. I don't care what they think about my categories that I'm using for grading. I want to see what people
just tell them they don't need to
think about the answers, what they think is correct.
Yeah, you can just say the rubric doesn't matter for you, it's for me. But even if they use it on accident, it doesn't affect anything to the student's grade. So. All right, so in the same session, because when we started, I told you the assignments in Canvas means 2 things. So what you've just seen is the actual tool of assignments. So like this is the thing that you would set up because you're really wanting to collect work from your students. If I go back into Canvas, I'm gonna go back to the home page here. And I click assignments again. The second way assignments, the term assignments is used in Canvas is to globally refer to all the types of assignments that you can do in Canvas. So again, we're mixing and matching discussions, which is here, quizzes, which is here, and assignments, which is here. Assignments is also going to be where you can set up different categories, and usually this is considered a weighted grade book. So if your syllabus says they get 20% for their writing, they get 10% for participation, they get 30% for the final exam, like whatever that looks like, that is also part of the terminology of assignments in Canvas. So if I went to the assignments area, which is where I'm at right now, that's going to be done using what's called a group. So by default, everyone gets a group called assignments, and everything just filters into this area. So kind of like if you were in the module section, everything kind of is falling under this assignments area. If you are a total points person and your whole class adds up to like 1,000 points or 100 points, then you don't have to worry about any of this. Just totally push all this stuff in here and you're fine. But if you did want to segment it, either for an organizational purpose or a weighted gradebook purpose, that's where you can actually have groups. So if I click plus group, I might want another one called quizzes. I can save. And then anytime you see these dots, you can actually grab on and move things around, kind of like we saw in the quizzes one before. So now under quizzes is the actual quiz that we created. Okay. This organization, however, is mostly just for you as the instructor. If you go into your student view, the students actually, wrong button, hold tight. The students actually see the assignments area very differently. They're going to see it categorized differently. So instead of seeing assignments and quizzes as you do, they see what they have upcoming, they see what they have undated, and they'll actually have another area that would say like past assignments, but we don't have any past assignments in here. So this one has its own category because we never even set a due date. This is what's upcoming. So if you organize your assignments area because you think it's helping your students, do realize that is not even what they see. They see it categorized very, very differently. If you are a weighted gradebook person and you want to set your Canvas course up that way, like we are all happy to help you because this can be something done at any time. But a quick reference to that is the first thing you have to do from the assignments area is actually click on the dots here and click assignment group weights and actually turn that on. You can actually set your assignment weights here. So maybe I want to say this one's 40, this one's 40. I'm not at 100%, so I'm gonna have to add another one. So for right now, I'm gonna say save, and you can see it put 40% of the grade here, 40% of the grade there, but I'm gonna need another group because I need to equal 100%. So I can create another group and call it, I'm gonna make it 20%. And now any assignment I either create and or drag into this area will then calculate my gradebook in a weighted gradebook fashion. This can be kind of confusing. So this is something where if you can get your assignments created, if this is the direction you want to go and then set up a weighted gradebook, that's where you can, I think after this week, we'll be able to help you guys a little bit better one-on-one with your specific courses with stuff like this. So that's the other way assignments are used in Canvas. And in the Keep Teaching, I think it's actually called writing assignments. Basically, everything we just did together is right here. If you are someone who just doesn't even want to get on board with the Canvas assignment stuff, your other way of collecting work would be them sharing like a Google Doc with you. But again, we've already heard multiple times today that Google stuff for potential students who won't be or who would be in China might be more problematic than it's worth. So that's why I didn't totally go in that direction. But here's your more Turnitin information. And then the other things we just did together are right here. All right, any other questions? I think I'm actually gonna stop the recording right now too. So one second.